And joining me now is January 6th committee member, Congressman Adam Schiff. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
That hearing had a lot in it. Let's start, though, with the evidence on that meeting to try to involve the military. This draft order, which would seem to potentially be illegal, that would instruct the Secretary of Defense to help Trump with that plot to steal the election even after certification, the appointment of this special counsel. One question I had, Congressman, I thought just watching it, a lot of it was laid out really clearly. I was confused, and I don't know if this is because of the Trump White House or the evidence, about whether the ultimate reality is that that started to happen, that Powell was that special counsel, that act occurred, which, as you know, is legally significant, or whether this was more of a muddle. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, I think we've had a conflict in the testimony on that, where, as you saw, White House counsel didn't believe that there had been an appointment, said the paperwork hadn't been done. Nevertheless, acknowledged that the president seemed to be going along with this idea. Sidney Powell, on the other hand, thought that she'd been appointed. And so I think it's unclear. But what is clear is that the president's allies were urging him to use the military to seize voting machines, to appoint someone patently unqualified to be some kind of special counsel to enforce this. And he was very receptive to it because they were willing to do whatever it took. And that's what Donald Trump has always been looking for.
Fair. You have been a prosecutor in your role before serving on this committee. They are different roles. I think a lot of people have known the seriousness which you apply to this. And so I'm really curious to get your view of something that former Mueller prosecutor Andrew Weissman said. I'm sure you read his piece in the New York Times, and he spoke about it here on The Beat. Take a listen. You're basically saying, with regard to some of these witnesses, they've been asleep at the wheel.
I think that's basically right. The Department of Justice has more tools, not fewer tools, than Congress to get at the truth.
Have you heard back from anyone at DOJ?
Yeah, I have, and I can't really talk about it, but I've heard from people both inside and people who have recently left.
Making some waves there. That was just last night. Congressman, this is a bit of a compliment to your committee, wrapped in a concern or alarm bell about the DOJ. And I think it is fair what he wrote, that we haven't seen this kind of, he called it a breakdown, you might put it differently, but whatever it is, between the Justice Department and the committee. But it also reflects that you've gotten to some witnesses first. Do you share Mr. Weissman's concern? Could the DOJ be doing more quickly?
I very much share his concern and have been expressing a very similar concern really for months now. It is so unprecedented, and I've been a part of many congressional investigations that have been contemporaneous with Justice Department investigations, but it is unprecedented for Congress to be so far out ahead of the Justice Department in a complex investigation, because as he was saying, as Andrew was saying, they've got potent tools to get information. They can enforce their own subpoenas in a way we can't. We have to go hat in hand to them to enforce our subpoenas or to enforce a criminal contempt. And the idea that a year and a half after these events, they would not have talked to these witnesses, that even the Fulton County District Attorney is way ahead of them, is I think, cause for great concern.
Are they afraid? Are they afraid of the answer? In other words, if the answer becomes overwhelming criminal evidence against Trump and they have it, then it puts more onus on them in the eyes of people inside the department who are going to know it and potentially history. Do you think they're afraid, or is there some other reason?
I don't think it's that they're afraid so much as a desire after, honestly, terrible leadership by Bill Barr. Look, I'm glad Bill Barr finally found a line he wouldn't cross, but he crossed a lot of lines before he got there, including intervening in criminal cases implicating the president to reduce Roger Stone's sentence and make Mike Flynn's case go away completely. And I think there's a desire of the Justice Department to restore the independence of the department, to avoid controversy. And while I appreciate all of that, I think that if they take that too far, that is that the desire to avoid controversy, and they somehow, in practical effect, immunize the former president because it would be controversial to investigate a former president. That's a political decision, and I think a very dangerous one.
I think I think you put it very well there, sir.
Well, thank you. I think that if the Attorney General is going to follow the evidence where it leads, then we've already seen evidence leading to the former president.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you can simply wait until you exhaust all the investigation of those that attacked the Capitol that day when there were multiple lines of effort to overturn the election.
Right.
And those multiple lines need to be investigated. And they don't necessarily start out with the people on the ground on January 6th.
Right. And then finally, before I lose you, whatever one thinks of Mr. Bannon, the pressure got to him. He is trying in some way to get out from under the trial that stems from the contempt that your committee and the Congress found. The other person who's gone down that road is Mr. Navarro. Here's what he's saying.
I'm stuck here where my duty and honor says I can't waive the privilege. What I need to do is respect the law, the Constitution, and my former commander-in-chief. The reason why I think Pence is guilty of treason to at least President Trump and perhaps to his country is that he acted on the basis of a flawed legal opinion concocted by his own general counsel that he did not share, Eric, with either the president.
And yet now, Congressman, Donald Trump has waived a privilege that didn't exist for Bannon and that, according to your committee, he never invoked. Is it still the case that there was never any invocation in writing of a privilege for Bannon or Navarro? And do the recent developments, in your view, mean that both men should comply fully, that is to say, testify and give up the documents?
Well, I think yes. And not only the recent developments ought to compel them to testify, they should have testified to begin with. And the fact that Mr. Bannon, as a part of what looks like a pretrial ploy, suddenly shows interest in coming and testifying, I don't think demonstrates anything but a desire to stay out of jail.
But you would take his testimony.
We would take his testimony, but we also want there to be justice. It cannot be the case that someone who is in criminal contempt of Congress can suddenly, on the eve of trial, escape accountability by saying, well, OK, I'll come in now. So, yes, we would like his testimony, but we want there to be justice served as well.
Understood. And at a busy time, I appreciate you joining us on The Beat, Congressman Schiff.
Thank you.